Is community-led growth really a thing you should be doing?
The amount of effort that you need to put in for the amount of engagement that you get back in the early days is incredibly outsized, meaning like you need to put in tons of effort intentionally to drive engagement within your community early and often in order for people to engage back.
That's Matt Volm, co-founder and CEO of RevOps Coop. And he makes it crystal clear what problems you'll face if you'll choose to build a community for your business.
Inevitably, you wind up with bad actors. People will start showing up with less than ideal intentions. And so now you think like you're in this great spot where like things can start to naturally and organically happen and like you can just like sit back. Now you need to start like investing your time and resources into moderating all of the stuff.
Before we jump into the show, today's episode is brought to you by Everstage, the top-rated sales commissions platform on G2, Gartner Peer Insights, and Trustradius, with more than 2,000 reviews from customers like Diligent, Wiley, Trimble, and more. Visit everstage.com and mention Revenue Formula to unlock a personalized sales compensation strategy session with one of Everstage's RevOps experts. And now, enjoy the show.
What's that jersey you have in the background?
Yeah,
there's like a number one.
Yeah, and it says RevOps on it. It's from the folks over at Traction Complete. They are one of our community partners, and when they joined, they're like, hey, what's your address? Want to just send you a little something. I was like, that sounds good. I was expecting, like coffee beans or something. I don't know, And then this like jersey shows up and I was like, this is awesome. So yeah, I was like, I got to put this somewhere in the office. So yeah, right now it's just over the chair.
So you're going to get one of those, what do you call it, like the frames to put it in?
Yeah, I know.
And then sign it.
Yeah.
And then what's going to happen is you're going to get 10. Yeah, exactly. And you're going to get 10 more jerseys now from every conceivable vendor who's now listening to this like, oh, we gotta try now. And also get hung up on the wall. No, that's awesome.
Yeah,
it's
cool.
It's so funny. I feel like merchandise, for the most part, it's a miss. And then, obviously grateful when you get a good bottle of wine. But then I never remember who sent it.
But no one ever gives you a great bottle of wine.
No, it happens once.
That just doesn't. I don't think that actually happens. Matt, wonderful to have you here. I think we should just jump right in there with maybe tell us a little bit the story of how you came to creating a community, right? Because I think there are really a couple of interesting twists and turns to it. And I think that should be the first thing the audience learns.
Yeah. So in typical, I'll say startup fashion, where we are right now as a company is certainly not where we thought we would ever be when we first started. So I started this current company about 4.5 years ago. And originally the idea was we were going to build RevOps software. So we were going to build a product called Funnel IQ, which was essentially end-to-end go-to-market analytics. So previously I was at an early stage startup as the VP of BizOps. And every Monday we would always get the various teams together to, review metrics, KPIs, talk about what we did last week, our game plan for the current week. And, everyone always spent hours putting these manual spreadsheets together. And then we spent our meetings mostly arguing over the data, whether it was right or wrong. And this is right when kind of RevOps was starting to bubble up, if you will. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. I shouldn't need a data engineer to be able to give my marketing leaders and my sales leaders and my CS leaders the data that they need to bring to these meetings and to be able to run their teams successfully. And so that was kind of the idea behind Funnel IQ is hey, let's productize that, right? Let's put the power into the hands of revenue operators to be able to, deliver metrics, insights to their stakeholders, without needing engineering resources. And so we raised pre-seed and seed on that idea, and we started to, kind of build our product as any software startup would. And one of our angel investors was like, hey, you should think about starting a community for people in RevOps. And I was like, that sounds great, but what's a community? What do you even mean by that? And, he kind of told me some things, right, on what he thought it meant, or essentially I was left with you can define it any way that you want, but the recommendation for the community was, hey, like RevOps is this new profession. And like with any new profession, people need resources, help, connections, and, community can be a place that can provide them with those resources. So we were like, hey, let's start a community as part of our go-to-market efforts with Funnel IQ. And so we decided to start a community. We decided to separately brand the community rather than call it like, the Funnel IQ community, because we didn't want it to be tied to the product. We did want it to be this separate, kind of independent thing that could deliver value to people in revenue operations. And then through that, right, we would be able to learn about people in RevOps, the problems that they had. We'd be able to kind of make them aware of our own product and solution, right? And so that was the origin, I guess, of RevOps Co-op and why we started the community in the first place. And originally we just started it as a Slack group and a newsletter. Those were the two programs that we ran for the community. And then, in typical startup fashion, we continued to build our software product. We brought our product to market. We had some paying customers, but just nothing where we ever found product market fit. And so a little over 2 years ago, we kind of got to this spot where I was looking at things and I was just like, man, like if we continue down this path, we probably got like another 10, 12 months left. And then, like money's out and, there's no more company to be left with. And I was like, so we can do that, right? Or, we can kind of cut the cord now and sunset the product and kind of go back to the drawing board. And so we opted to do the latter. And so we sunsetted the Funnel IQ product and decided to just focus on the community as our business and see if there was a business to be had there. And that's really been the focus ever since for the last 2.5 years now, has been just community building and growing RevOps Co-op to, I think we've got about 15,000 plus members now, kind of all over the globe.
And if I saw this right, you also founded a company, or maybe it was in the same context of building software for community itself, right? Kind of that happened probably in parallel to your experience with RevOps Co-ops, kind of seeing all of those pains, what kind of, what they are around, and then trying to fix that. Tell us a little bit maybe about that journey briefly as well. Yeah,
so I did kind of skip over that a little bit in the middle. So I mentioned when we sunsetted Funnel IQ and we went back to the drawing board, at first I was like, okay, we still got our community RevOps Co-op. And I was like, well, let's see if there's a way to drive revenue, monetize anything that we have with the community. And then we'll kind of evaluate other problems that we see in the market and maybe our own unique viewpoint and superpowers as a team to see what other problems might be worth solving. And so at the time, this was before the economy and the markets have really shifted, right? From, the venture market was still hot, right? Like crypto was still popular, right? Like everyone was still moving to Miami. So this was right before all those things changed. And at the time, what we saw, we were like, hey, we've got this community. We started it as part of our own go-to-market efforts. A lot of other companies had started their own communities as well. And we looked at a lot of the products that were out there, these community platforms, and we were like, honestly, they just kind of suck. We've used some of them. They weren't good. And so we were like, let's build a product for ourselves, a community management platform product, right? For ourselves, solve our own problems, and then we'll bring that to market. And so we started working on that idea. We were calling that product Atomic. And we built a product and we were using it ourselves, and it was delivering a lot of value. And then the market shifted and changed. And within a month or two, these community teams that we were planning to essentially sell into, they were the first ones that were let go and being part of Riffs. And so now we had the opposite problem as we did with Funnel IQ. So with Funnel IQ, we knew there was a market and RevOps was growing, but we weren't able to solve the problem that we didn't have the right recipe, we just couldn't figure out the right product to solve that problem and deliver value in a way that we could build a business on. And so there we were like, hey, there's market potential, but we couldn't figure out what the product would look like to solve those problems. With Atomic, we realized we had the opposite problem. We had a product that was super valuable for us, and we did have a handful of users that were paying us and were very happy with the product as well. But once the market shifted, it was like, there's no more, like there's just not a very big market for this, right? Like not a lot of people are going to be operating these Slack communities and, kind of running these things as part of their own go-to-market efforts. The ones that will still exist are going to be, like more of a side project or a side hustle typically. And so it's like, there's not a huge market potential for this sort of product. And so ended up making the same decision with that of like, hey, we need to sunset this product. Now, the difference there with Funnel IQ is we are still using the Atomic product internally. So it's basically like a internal product that we built for ourselves. And I think between like AWS and the other random miscellaneous charges, it cost us like $100 a month or something, right, to keep it running. But it still does a lot of automation and other things for us. So a very valuable, kind of internal product, I guess, that we're left with. But yeah, that was I don't even know what pivot that would have been, but yeah, came to the same conclusion with Atomic as we did for Funnel IQ.
So, this story seems a bit familiar, doesn't it? You have to admit, we've gone through a similar exercise. What could be salvaged from the company was then this show, which also has a community.
Roblox was in a similar space as Funnel IQ. That's kind of what he's kind of referring to.
Yeah.
And as part of building Roblox, we're like, how should we do this? And then we kind of built the show. And now we kind of took the show out and doing something else with it actually.
Yeah.
But I was actually you have a question, right?
Yeah, no. So I think we basically now have a person on this show who's managed to build a successful community.
Yeah.
And I by the way know this. I'm in there lurking. I'm not super active because I'm not a RevOps, I guess, but I'm in there and I can just say it's one of the more active communities. Usually what people then probably would proceed to ask you, Matt, is, well, how do we build an awesome community and where should we go? I actually think it would be more interesting to maybe talk about why shouldn't folks be building a community right now? Because you kind of also mentioned it was one of the first things folks cut. So I'd be curious to hear, what are some of the things where you would go like, hey, actually, I don't think you should do it?
Yeah. Well, so one, building any business or product, right, but I'll say like building a community and then building a community business is uniquely hard for a couple of reasons. Is one, now, especially now, there's a lot of options out there for people when it comes to communities. And so I know, one of the things that we hear often from members and other folks is I just don't want another Slack group, right? I don't want another Slack icon hanging out in my Slack that I need to go to. And my response to that is that is totally okay. I get that 100%. And so what that means for us is we need to offer a variety of programs or ways that members and folks can get involved and participate in the community. Some people love the Slack group, right? They love being able to go in there, ask a question, and immediately get a bunch of different responses. Other people are there's so much activity in there, it's hard to keep up, right? It's noisy, I just don't want another thing. And so it's okay, well, then we need to offer you other ways to participate in the community, other programs, right? So we have our newsletter, we have digital events that we do, we have in-person events that we do, we have courses, we have a knowledge hub, we have our conference, right? So now you're in this spot where you need to offer a variety of different programs, right? Which are hard to maintain and, hard to execute on and deliver value on all of those things. So that's one. The other thing I'll mention a second thing I'll mention is community engagement, especially when you're first starting a community, is really hard. And the amount of effort that you need to put in for the amount of engagement that you get back in the early days is incredibly outsized, meaning you need to put in tons of effort intentionally to drive engagement within your community early and often in order for people to engage back, get value, and then ultimately get to this tipping point that you want to get to, which is your effort then shifts from like trying to drive engagement that's there to now moderating the engagement that is taking place. So that's another thing where, right, like in the early days, I was there, in our Slack group trying to like ask questions, drum up engagements, respond to every introduction that would pop up, leave a bunch of like Slack emojis on everything, with digital events and elsewhere, right? Like trying to get people to register and attend and, engage. And so sending out all of these like LinkedIn DMs and Slack messages, all this stuff, right? Like you do all this work. And then eventually you get to this point where as more and more people start coming in, right, you're like, now engagement starts to naturally happen, right? And you're like, oh, this is great. But then guess what? Inevitably, you wind up with bad actors, right? Like people will start showing up with less than ideal intentions. And so now you think like you're in this great spot where like things can start to naturally and organically happen and like you can just like sit back. The first part of that is true. The second part is not. Now you need to start like investing your time and resources into moderating all of the stuff that is there. And I can give you a few examples of like some crazy shit that people have tried to pull within our community. So like one example, this actually happened like a couple of months ago. Someone joined and, kid you not, within 10 minutes started to send a DM to literally every person in the Slack group, basically like pitching them on their product. They were like, hey, I'm person XYZ. I'm the co-founder of this company. This is what they do. You can learn more here. And like, would you like a demo? And so like all of a sudden I start to get like a flurry of like spam reports. So I kick this person out of the community. Then they sign up again with a different email address and manage to like sneak their way back in and start the same thing starting to happen. So like there's no automated way to like track for stuff like that or to like prevent stuff like that from happening, right? So like that's just one example of like things that cost time and energy. And actually another thing, this was like a year or 2 years ago, someone joined the community. They were working at like a revenue technology company and, like started to ask some questions about like our like sponsoring stuff and like different things, right? So I was like, kind of giving them idea and like some ways that they could get involved, what they could do as a member, what they could do as a partner. Then, like I thought we were going to get to a deal, right? Eventually they kind of just went dark on me. I didn't, think anything of it. And all of a sudden, like a couple weeks later, I get like a spam report from a user. They're like, hey, you probably want to know about this. This guy just DM'd me asking if I wanted to join his RevOps community. And I looked and it was this guy who was like all interested in our partner program and stuff. And so clearly he like joined our community, was sleuthing around to just like collect as much information as he could because he wanted to go and like build his own community for his company. And then he started to like invite everyone who was in our community to join his community. Again, like I get reports of all this. So like those are just two examples like of things that, are like wild that you need to worry about, right? But like another example of like why the community building thing is not easy. And then the third thing that I'll mention, this is like whether you're trying to build a community as a business like we are, or if you're building the community as part of a strategy that you might have for your own company, is like things cost money, right? Like your time is valuable, right? Like I need to pay people to moderate our Slack group. I need to pay people to create content for us. None of these things are free, right? But the expectation from the members and from other people, right, is like a lot of this stuff, right, that we deliver, like the expectation is that it should be free. So now you're in this conundrum where it's like to create a community that's valuable for members, there's the expectation for a lot of people that like that stuff should be free for them. But in order to deliver on that promise, like you need to spend money and invest in order to do this. And so you're in this constant like push and pull that is different than any software or digital product where it's like very obvious that like people would expect to exchange, like money for what they get in return. Like community is not that way. And so those are 3 challenges, right? Of like building a business and running a community that are simply, they're not easy.
Would you say, I mean, you mentioned, hey, RevOps was pretty early on back then, and therefore it made sense to create a community around it. It might have been one of the reasons why this worked out for you. Do you think, is that a valid way to go about it? It's like, oh, there's a new role, probably new community is necessary. Would you, if someone was considering to build a community as part of their company, not necessarily kind of to build a community as the company itself, would you say that that's a good way of reasoning through this, or would you even in that case, you're like, you know what, don't do it, don't build a community yourself?
Yeah, I think it's actually very well. So I'll tell you stuff about our story and how we kind of lucked into this, and then I'll end with like a thing about how I think you can approach this in the same way you would with any product that you're building.
Yeah.
So for us with RevOps, again, like hindsight is 2020. So I want to preface this, like I was not some visionary that had all of this in mind when we started things. But as I look back, I think the things that worked out in our favor and where we really lucked out are, one, like you said, Tony, RevOps it was a new role, right? And so it was this new thing that was taking off. And if you look at the RevOps role, there's a couple of things that are unique about it. One is that no one goes to school to get like a degree in revenue operations, right? And so with this new role, it meant a lot of people were learning on the job, and they were learning as they went. And so naturally, then you start to ask yourself, like, am I doing this right? Is there a better way, right? You start to kind of look and search for ways to do your job better. And then the other thing that worked in our favor with RevOps is that typically they were small teams or teams of one. And so when you were faced with those questions of like, how should I do this? Is this the right way? You look around and you're the only one at your company doing it, right? So it's like, okay, like who the hell should I ask, right? I have no idea, right? And so then again, you go out searching that sort of feedback. And then the third thing was COVID and the pandemic meant lots of people were working from home, sitting in their home offices, right? And so now you're in this spot where you have no formal education in revenue operations. You're learning on the job. You're typically the only person at your company or one of a few that actually do it. And you're in your home office and you're like, how on earth, I've got all these expectations, right? How can I do this better? How can I execute on this in the best way? And a community was a great resource for them because it gave them access to other people like them. Right? We were writing like blogs and doing these digital events, right? So people now had access to all these resources and people to help them do their jobs better. And there weren't a lot, if any, other, call it like communities or quote unquote products like them, like us, that were out there in the market for people. And I think that's the other thing that I'll mention. So if you're in a spot where, again, you have a company, you're building a product, and you're like, hey, I think there's an opportunity for us to build a community to help, drive loyalty, awareness, right? All these things that, a community can do for you is like, one, you've got to look at what other options people have. Like, are there other communities, right? In the same way that you would if you were trying to solve a problem and solve it with a digital solution, approach community the same way of like, well, what's the problem that you're going to solve for these people? And then what solution are you going to offer them, and understand the competition, right? That might be out there in the market. And that's where, there's always opportunity. And I think the biggest thing for us that we did, and I think where people could see opportunity today is, there's that saying, the riches are in the niches. So it's like, find your slice and like stick to it, right? So for us from the very beginning, it was all about RevOps all the time. So if you joined and you wanted to, you were more into like, I don't know, sales development and like, how to write the best like cold email, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of value from RevOps Co-op. But, if you wanted, if you're super into like email deliverability and like how to set up all the things and integrations, right? To like make sure you're not landing in spam and increasing your open rates and reply rates, like that stuff is talked about all the time. in our community. And so for us, like we've stayed really true to that, even though you could be tempted to try to like broaden to, again, like either grow or like get more people in or appeal to more type of people. So I think that's the other thing, like for anyone, any companies who might be looking at starting communities today, is like the same way you would with a V1 of a digital product, is like start narrow, right? Like, and just like stay hyper focused on that. And that'll be the thing that'll really drive value for your members.
I just wanted to comment on this.
Go for
then
it.
You can go for the next question here. But it's like, you know, when you think about communities, you think about DBT Labs, right? They built a massive community and then blew up. I think Figma did the same thing, community, and you know, then it blew up. And there are a bunch of other examples for that. And go-to-market partners then also came out with community-led growth, right? So it's like, oh, this is apparently a way to build pipeline and to help a company kind of increase. So this is the allure for people. It's like, oh, wow, this is, you know, it's not only inbound and outbound. I can do something else now as well. But I think what you kind of said there is also what went through my mind when we were actually thinking about this back in the day was it's really like a product that needs to reach product market fit in order to achieve that kind of what's missing with the people out there. You know, what is it that you're going to deliver? And yes, you need to think about it like product market fit, which means it's going to be extremely painful. It's going to be really difficult to get there. And don't just think opening a Slack channel, sending out some invitations, and boom, you have a community. That is not how it's gonna work. But over to you, Mikkel.
No, I don't know if you have a comment back on that.
No, just it's exactly what Tony said, which is like you wish that it just took inviting a bunch of people to like join an email list or like get into your Slack group to have a quote unquote community. But it's a lot harder than that. And then the other thing that I'll mention is for any companies, again, that are either looking at like starting their own communities or participating in communities, you brought up like the ROI and like the pipeline builder. So, you know, like one, I don't want to say the like attribution and measurement of this stuff is like impossible, but like, you know, don't expect to be able to like clearly trace like X number of deals or pipeline that you've sourced from the community, because it's like, well, you won't be able to. It'll be really hard, right? And so like, I'll just give you a couple of examples of some of the things that we've seen to prove that out. So one was talking with a member a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about CPQ, and they brought up like one of the companies that is a partner of ours in the community. And they were like, oh yeah, I saw the new partner announcement that you had on them a couple of months ago. And just recently we like decided to like start looking at a new CPQ provider. So I actually just took a demo with them last week, just went to their website, right? Like signed up for a demo. And then I asked our partner about that. And they were like, oh yeah, no, they just like, it was marked as inbound on the demo side, right? And so it's like, that's one example of like, you start showing up in places like existing communities, or you start your own. Those sort of things are going to happen all the time. And that's kind of the point, right? Is like you start to show up in consistent ways in all of these different channels that drives the outcome that you're looking to achieve, but it's not going to be directly attributable or measurable. And then the other thing that I'll mention is, and this goes typically like against the natural tendencies of anyone in sales, which is you'll actually deliver the most value through community by not mentioning or pitching your product at all. Instead, just lead with the category expertise that you have, which will generate the product outcomes that you're looking to drive. So one of our partners a couple months ago through the community, they have this software that helps you with financial planning and like your revenue operating model, basically. And so we did a digital event with them where they just talked about like the building blocks of a successful financial plan and a revenue operating model, right? Like how you can build this in a spreadsheet. They literally did not mention their product at all, even though their product basically automates all of this stuff for you. And the week after the event, the digital event with them, I saw them in person and I was like, oh, hey, how'd that event go we did last week? They're like, it was great. We didn't mention our product at all. And we've already gotten like 10 demos from it. And so like, those are the things that with participating in communities, again, whether it's your own that you start or one that you decide to partner with, is like those go against the expectation or the natural tendency of any marketer, any salesperson, which is like, okay, I've got to get comfortable with maybe not having direct attribution to pipeline or closed $1, and I need to like get comfortable with leading with my category expertise and not mentioning my product at all in order to be successful. Like, but those are actually the two things like that will make you the most successful through any community strategy that you deploy.
It's just so funny. Like you mentioned earlier, bad actors, and I was gonna go like, yeah, if you build this as a company, the bad actors, guess what? They're gonna be your salespeople in some cases. They're gonna be like hounding that community and pitching, and also you're probably gonna have conversations happening there that you kind of don't want happening, such as an alternative to your solution. To be quite honest, that it might be a thing that you then just need to kind of figure out to deal with, and it's really difficult.
Oh yeah,
I kind of wonder like, is it legitimate to start a community with the sole purpose of building pipeline? Honestly, just based on what you said, it's like, hey, you shouldn't do any selling, that kind of thing. Do you think that's perfectly fine? And how would you even go about that then?
Yeah, well, I think the way that I always talk about like brands or vendors or products, right, participating in communities, whether it's their own or an existing one, is you can get value in really three ways. So pipeline generation is absolutely one of them. Pipeline influence is another. And then just overall awareness, right? Air cover for all of the other things that you're doing, whether it's ABM or outbound or any of that stuff, right? Those are like three concrete ways that you as a company can get value from participating in communities. But like I said, the way that you'll accomplish those three things are different than the way that you go to market through any other channel, which is, like I said, leading with the expertise that you have. It's recognizing that in that Slack group, for example, when someone asks a question about CPQ, you may or may not be brought up. And if you are, you might be alongside a bunch of other competitors of yours. And again, like then your natural tendency is that you want to like, I don't know, dive in, right? Start to like talk about like why you're different and like how you're better, right? But that's actually like, if you do that, that is the thing that will actually make you look most poorly to those people there. And so instead, like in those cases, right? Like, like loop in customers that you have, right? Like let them do the talking for you, like respond or like reply to things that are relevant maybe in that post. Don't badmouth your competition, right? Like don't try to hard sell or pitch anyone right there, like in the Slack thread. Like that stuff's not going to work. But like learn from all the stuff that's there, right? If someone, for example, like if someone asks a question about a category, right? And a bunch of people respond and no one mentions your name, like learn from that, right? Like why, like, be like, why are we not mentioned at all? Even though like this is our category, right? So there's a lot of value that you can get from customer discovery, learning about the way that your prospects potentially talk, the problems that they have, right? How they interact, how they engage, like that can make you better at going to market through all the other channels that you have. And then, like I said, give you another avenue to deploy your category expertise and subject matter expertise, which is really how you can be most effective in communities.
One of the ways I was thinking about building, what would be the upside of building a community? Because I agree with all of these things, by the way. And I think primarily it's actually an awareness play. It's less so the other stuff, even though the other stuff sounds more valuable. The way I was thinking about it is like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had someone that knows our brand or kind of knows the community, and then they invite all of their friends, and then they suddenly also know our brand, right? So that's what I was kind of thinking about there, what the value would be. But be that as it may, so we talked about some of the macro events that happened that helped you, right? RevOps inception, and then really kind of the increase of that. We talked about COVID, etc. Do you? It's hard to almost avoid this topic, but do you think with the current, Gen AI and all of that stuff, Do you think that people flock more to communities actually because of some of the more synthetic content that's online, and it's harder to differentiate? Like, is a real comment? Is it a real LinkedIn post? And kind of drawing more to the, hey, no, this clearly is a person.
Yeah,
so, in the community. Do you see a trend there, or is this am I just making up things?
No, so I think, well, so one, I'll answer first with some data, and then two, I'll give you my kind of thoughts or opinions on that. So over the last, 4.5 years now, we have basically been adding about 75 new members per week to the community since week one. So like that hasn't changed really at all. And that happens through people joining, inviting their team members, their friends, their colleagues. That happens through people seeing our own content on the internet, right? And so like people are joining at the same rate that they have been for the last 4 years or so. I think mostly because one, RevOps is expanding outside of the United States. So a lot more countries or companies in other countries outside of the US are adopting revenue operations. And the other thing we're seeing is RevOps is expanding outside of software and technology companies. So a lot of the newer members that we're getting now are at an increasing rate outside of software and technology, which is very different than it was before. And I think, again, like all companies, like we've had to certainly evolve as time has gone on. I mentioned how we started as a Slack group and a newsletter, and then added some, digital events. And a lot of the stuff that we were doing was just digital. But now we've added a lot more in-person stuff to the mix. So we have, RevOps AFR conference. You're going to be speaking at the event in Berlin in June. We have a US event in New Orleans in May. We do a lot of small group in-person events. We're doing like some of these like small group dinners in places like San Francisco and Seattle and elsewhere. So I think the main thing that people are kind of, I don't know if craving or like have demand for now is like the human to human kind of peer-to-peer connections. Yeah. And even like post-COVID, right? Like, even though that's the spot we're in now, again, a lot of people are still either working from home or in this hybrid environment. Revenue operators, at least, are, still typically small teams or teams of one. And so while AI and kind of Gen AI is definitely like, there's just a lot more noise, digital noise around those things. I think that's driving people to actually want a lot more like actually person-to-person connection now than it ever has before. And so we're just trying to, again, like through our community, at least give people a variety of ways to achieve that, to get that in-person connection, whether it's through these conferences, these smaller group in-person events, or even just like, peer-to-peer matching and like connections that we can make and facilitate through the community, maybe over Slack, maybe over LinkedIn, right? But like, connecting people, right? Where it's not like there's a robot on the other side.
Yeah.
I also kind of wonder, like, so when we started this show, we looked at each other and we said, hey, we're going to give it a year, because that's probably what it's going to take. And I also imagine, just having heard the story of, hey, initially you're going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting with the engagement until you can kind of let go, and it's moderation. How long do you think it will take on average? Like, would be your rule of thumb in terms of how long would it take until you start seeing some results if you want to do it as a business? And what mindset do you need to start this thing with even?
Yeah. Well, I think as a founder of anything, I don't know, someone asked me this question like a couple months ago. They're like, well, how do you know when you made it? And I was like, I never know. Like, I have no fucking idea if I made it. I don't know if I'll ever know when I make it, because, right. And like, you guys know this, like starting companies, right? Like, it's like day to day, week to week, you're like, like that's the mindset that you have to have, is like, I don't know if this thing will be around tomorrow. Right. So like, what else can I do today? Right. To like drive value, create value, like make this thing exist tomorrow. So like, that's kind of the mindset that I've had from the very beginning. And it's literally just like, let's try new things. And you kind of go into those with the expectation that they're not going to work, and you're going to have to like move on to the next thing that will work. and somehow be okay with literally doing that every day of your life over 4.5 years. That's been my experience now, and still being in that spot where you're never comfortable that things are working, even if they are working. Because again, you know, like you've seen it before, like you can't take any of that stuff for granted. Like markets change, businesses change, world leaders change, right? Like you don't know what's going to happen that's going to impact the thing that you have now. So starting anything new, I think, like, again, whether it's an internal initiative at a company or something that you're going to start on your own for yourself, that's kind of like the mindset you've got to approach it with, is like, you know, do something for yourself today to drive value for tomorrow, and know that that's essentially what you're signing up for, and it's never going to feel comfortable, and you've got to be fine knowing that, right? Going to get knocked down on your face every day, and you got to get back up and try it tomorrow.
I was also thinking about one of the communities out there that's been around for a while and very popular is HubSpot user groups. I guess we could kind of clarify that as a community. I don't know if they have a formal channel where people interface, but they have meetups, they have specific news going out to that group. I just wonder if that's maybe a more feasible way to go about it for some companies, at least, to think about that, because then you basically shed the weight of, and maybe you don't, but bad actors, but you do still get the challenging conversations now in a Slack channel, right? Yep. I don't know if you've given any thought or reflection into that kind of dimension, because we've at least discussed it from usually a acquisition, point of view. And I think when you look at go-to-market partners, when you stack community-led growth along with outbound, it just becomes an acquisition thing, right?
Yeah. So if I was starting a software company today, or if I had a software company, I think there's I don't know, this is the way that I would, I guess, look at community. So I think you can serve prospects and customers through community. And you brought up the HubSpot example, right? So I'm sure you've seen a lot of companies that do their customer support through Slack, right?
Yeah.
So, so one, it's like people are already there, right? They're typically using that app to, do business and do their jobs already. So why not deliver customer support and kind of customer success through something like Slack, which means, right, have a separate Slack workspace. You can invite those people there. Your CSMs can be in there, right? You can do support tickets, the whole deal. And there's other software products out there that can help you do that, right? So if you're going to take that approach to customer success, which I think is a smart one, then it's like, well, why not, maybe branch out side of your customers, and whether you make it product specific, like a HubSpot user group, or category specific, like we did, right, with RevOps Co-op, right, maybe aimed at your persona or your ICP, like you can start like we did, right? You have a Slack workspace and you have a newsletter that has some unique and valuable content. Like that can be a very good starting point for a community. And now if you're inviting people to this Slack group, for example, you're now winding up, in a place where you have your customers and your prospects now in the same place. And again, you keep assuming you continue to grow, get more customers start getting added to that, right? And so you're now creating this kind of natural environment where people can naturally interact with each other, and you're delivering value to both. And, in a very, logical way, right? Where you're delivering customer success and customer support to your customers. You're delivering kind of thought leadership, category expertise that you have to your prospects, and you're creating this natural environment for them to connect and engage with each other, which is also very valuable for all of them that's there. So I think that's one unique way that people could look at community building today.
Yeah. And I'm kind of just commenting on this, maybe also to
sunset the show, as you said it last time, or
we wanted to cut that out to kind of slowly end the episode. Actually, It's also, so what I'm also hearing is not, community doesn't equal Slack or Slack group or Slack conversation or something like this, right? There are many different ways to go about building a community, and I think what you said there in the end sounds like a really cool, natural way for many organizations to try and, not necessarily kind of build a community for pipe gen or for, awareness purposes, but to still have a place for people to meet and yes, still, serve a business purpose, right? So I think there are pretty cool different ways around it. If you do want to build a community to kind of build awareness and so forth, just know it's a lot more difficult than you think, right? I think that's the other message coming around here from Matt here today, and I think that kind of rounds it up pretty nicely. Did you have another takeaway, Mikkel?
No, I was just gonna say it's great to get someone who built a successful community to come on and say, hey, here's like all the reasons you shouldn't do it. So now people can decide, are we actually going to do this thing or
and
no?
Because he would never do it, because he knows how to position, his product in the best way. I'll do it for him. If you want to engage with, RevOps folks, I think there's no better way than to do it on RevOps Coop and maybe join, as a sponsor, I don't know, probably do this for the events or for the channel and so forth. Just hit up Matt. I'm sure he has plenty of options for you to potentially do this. Matt, thank you so much for spending some time here today and enlightening us and our listeners. And have a good day to you, and have a good day to everyone listening. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Mikkel.
Bye.